The crisp autumn air carried a hint of wood smoke as David Carter's sleek sports car wound its way up the long, overgrown driveway. If you're enjoying the content, leave a like to support the channel. Gravel crunched beneath the tires, a sound that seemed almost intrusive in the profound silence that blanketed the estate. As the dense canopy of ancient oaks gave way to an open expanse, David's breath caught in his throat. There, silhouetted against the fiery sunset, stood Ravenswood Manor, a behemoth of weathered stone and faded grandeur that both awed and intimidated him. At 32, David had already made a name for himself in New York's cutthroat world of architecture. His modernist designs graced the covers of glossy magazines, and his client list read like a who's who of the city's elite. Yet for all his professional success, a gnawing emptiness had taken root in his soul. His spacious Tribeca loft felt more like a showroom than a home, and his social circle consisted mainly of networking contacts and casual acquaintances. David had everything he'd once thought he wanted, only to discover it wasn't enough. The purchase of Ravenswood had been impulsive, driven by a mixture of professional ambition and a deep-seated longing he couldn't quite name. When the listing for the long-abandoned mansion appeared in his inbox, something inside David had stirred, a feeling of recognition, as if he'd been waiting for this opportunity his entire life without realizing it. Now, as he stepped out of his car and breathed in the musty scent of decay and forgotten dreams, David felt a curious sensation wash over him. It was as if the very stones of Ravenswood were whispering to him, welcoming him home. He shook his head, chuckling at his own flights of fancy. This was a restoration project, nothing more. A chance to breathe new life into a neglected masterpiece and, perhaps, add another feather to his professional cap. But as David approached the imposing front doors, their once gleaming brass handles now tarnished and worn, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was stepping into something far bigger than himself. The massive oak doors creaked open with a sound that seemed to echo through the very foundations of the house, stirring dust motes that danced in the fading sunlight. The foyer was a cathedral of faded opulence. A grand staircase swept upward, its carved banister telling stories of long-ago balls and whispered secrets. Tattered silk wallpaper clung stubbornly to the walls, and crystal chandeliers hung like stalactites, their brilliance dimmed by years of neglect. David's footsteps echoed hollowly as he moved deeper into the house, each room revealing new wonders and challenges. In the cavernous ballroom, ornate plasterwork crumbled from the ceiling, leaving scars on the once pristine parquet floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows, their glass clouded with age, offered tantalizing glimpses of overgrown gardens and forgotten pathways. David's mind raced with possibilities, envisioning the space restored to its former glory, a perfect blend of historic charm and modern functionality. As twilight deepened into true night, David found himself in what must have been the library. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves lined the walls, their contents a jumble of leather-bound tomes and crumbling paperbacks. The musty scent of old paper and forgotten knowledge filled the air, and David felt a shiver of excitement run down his spine. This room, more than any other, spoke to him of the lives that had been lived within these walls, of dreams pursued, love found and lost, and secrets buried in the passage of time. It was here, surrounded by the whispers of the past, that David made a decision. Ravenswood wouldn't just be another project, another line on his already impressive resume. No, he would move in, immerse himself fully in the restoration process. He would breathe life back into these neglected rooms, coaxing forth the beauty and mystery that lay dormant within their walls. As if in response to his silent vow, a sudden gust of wind swept through the library, rustling pages and stirring the dust. For a moment, David could have sworn he heard laughter, faint and ethereal, like an echo from another time. He smiled, chalking it up to an overactive imagination fueled by the romance of his surroundings. Yet as he made his way back to his car to retrieve his overnight bag, David couldn't shake the feeling that Ravenswood had been waiting for him all along. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. David assembled a small army of craftsmen and restoration experts, each hand-picked for their skill and discretion. The grounds came alive with the sounds of hammering, sawing, and the constant hum of activity. Yet even as scaffolding went up and dumpsters filled with debris, David found himself increasingly drawn to the quieter corners of the estate, to the rooms and passages that seemed to resist the encroachment of the modern world. It was during one of these solitary explorations that David first heard the whispers. He had been examining a section of wall in the grand ballroom, running his fingers along the faded silk wallpaper, when a sound like rushing wind filled his ears. Within it, he could have sworn he heard voices, snatches of conversation, laughter, and what might have been music. David stepped back, heart pounding. But the moment had passed. The ballroom was silent once more, save for the distant sounds of construction. That night, as David tossed and turned in the makeshift bedroom he'd set up in one of the less dilapidated guest rooms, his dreams were filled with images of Ravenswood in its heyday. He saw elegant couples swirling across polished floors, their laughter mingling with the strains of a string quartet. In the library, a distinguished gentleman with piercing eyes and a neatly trimmed beard pored over ledgers, his face creased with worry. And everywhere, threading through these visions like a golden thread, was the sense of something hidden, something precious beyond measure. David awoke with a start, the echo of a woman's desperate plea fading from his mind. "Find it," she had whispered, her face obscured by shadow. "Before it's too late." He sat up, rubbing his eyes and trying to shake off the lingering tendrils of the dream. Sunlight streamed through the gaps in the heavy velvet curtains, and the house was already coming alive with the sounds of the work crew arriving. As he made his way downstairs, nodding greetings to the workers, David's mind kept returning to the dream and the whispers he'd heard in the ballroom. He'd always prided himself on being a rational man, driven by logic and measurable results. But there was something about Ravenswood that defied easy explanation, that tugged at the edges of his carefully ordered world. It was mid-morning when the discovery was made. David had been supervising the removal of a section of damaged wainscoting in the ballroom when one of the workers called out in surprise. There, nestled in a hidden recess within the wall, was a small, ornate box. David's heart raced as he carefully extracted it, feeling the weight of history in his hands. The box was a work of art in itself, inlaid with mother-of-pearl and intricate woodwork. With trembling fingers, David lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, lay two objects, a folded piece of yellowed paper and a tarnished silver key. David unfolded the paper with utmost care, revealing a hand-drawn map of the estate. Certain areas were marked with cryptic symbols, and scrawled along the bottom in an elegant, if shaky, hand were the words, "To my heir, may you succeed where I have failed. The true treasure of Ravenswood awaits." David's mind reeled. The local rumors of hidden treasure, which he had dismissed as fanciful gossip, suddenly took on new significance. But even as excitement coursed through him, a small voice of caution urged restraint. He carefully replaced the map and key in the box, then called a halt to work in the ballroom for the day. He needed time to think, to plan his next move carefully. That evening, after the workers had left, and the house settled into its nightly silence, David sat in the library, the box open before him on a dusty desk. The map lay unfolded, its cryptic markings seeming to shift in the flickering candlelight. As he traced the lines with his finger, David felt a connection to the man who had drawn it, the last true master of Ravenswood, whose presence still seemed to linger in every shadow. That evening, after the workers had left and the house settled into its nightly silence, David sat in the library, the box open before him on a dusty desk. The map lay unfolded, its cryptic markings seeming to shift in the flickering candlelight. As he traced the lines with his finger, David felt a connection to the man who had drawn it, the last true master of Ravenswood, whose presence still seemed to linger in every shadow. Hours slipped by unnoticed as David pored over the map, his architect's mind working to reconcile the faded lines with the mansion's current layout. Some areas corresponded perfectly, while others hinted at rooms or passages he had yet to discover. The symbols scattered across the paper defied easy interpretation, a series of concentric circles near the east wing, a stylized key in what appeared to be the cellar, a single eye drawn with painstaking detail atop the highest tower. As the candle burned low, casting long shadows across the room, David found his thoughts drifting to the man who had created this puzzle. Who had he been, this enigmatic figure whose legacy now rested in David's hands? The few historical records he'd managed to uncover painted a picture of Jeremiah Ravenswood as a brilliant but troubled man, a railroad tycoon whose wealth had been matched only by his eccentricities. Stretching his stiff muscles, David rose and moved to the window. The grounds of Ravenswood spread out before him, bathed in silvery moonlight. Ancient oaks stood like sentinels, their gnarled branches reaching for the star-strewn sky. And there, just visible beyond a tangle of overgrown hedges, was a glint of water, a lake he hadn't noticed before, its surface a mirror reflecting the heavens. A sudden breeze stirred the heavy drapes, carrying with it the scent of roses and something else, a hint of tobacco, perhaps, or the lingering trace of an old cologne. David whirled, half expecting to see a figure standing in the shadows. But the library remained empty, the only movement the guttering flame of the dying candle. Heart pounding, David returned to the desk. As he reached for the map, his hand brushed against the silver key. A jolt, like static electricity but stronger, passed through him. In that moment, a series of images flashed through his mind. A hidden door sliding open, a narrow staircase descending into darkness, walls lined with strange symbols, and at the end. The vision faded before he could grasp its conclusion, leaving him breathless and disoriented. David sank back into the chair, his mind reeling. He had always prided himself on his rational, analytical approach to life. But in the span of a single day, his world had been turned upside down. The whispers he'd dismissed, the dreams that felt more like memories, the undeniable sense that Ravenswood itself was alive, watching and waiting. It all pointed to something beyond his understanding. As the first light of dawn began to creep through the windows, David came to a decision. He would follow this mystery wherever it led, not just out of curiosity or the lure of hidden treasure, but because he felt, deep in his bones, that it was what he was meant to do. Ravenswood had called to him for a reason, and he would answer that call. With renewed purpose, David carefully refolded the map and placed it, along with the key, back into the ornate box. He tucked it securely into a hidden compartment he'd discovered in the massive oak desk, a temporary measure until he could decide on a safer hiding place. As he did so, his fingers brushed against something else, a small, leather-bound book wedged into the back of the compartment. Intrigued, David eased the book out. Its cover was unmarked, the leather cracked and faded with age. He opened it carefully, mindful of its fragility. The pages were filled with handwritten entries, a journal, he realized, dating back to the late 1800s. The handwriting matched that on the map, spidery and elegant. David's breath caught as he read the first entry. April 15th, 1879. I have done it. After years of searching, of piecing together fragments of lore from a dozen different cultures, I have finally unlocked the secret. The power hidden within Ravenswood is greater than I ever imagined. But at what cost? The things I have seen, the truths I have glimpsed, they are almost too much for a mortal mind to bear. I fear I have set in motion events that cannot be undone. May God have mercy on my soul. David's hands trembled as he turned the page, hungry for more. But the next entry was dated nearly a year later, the handwriting noticeably shakier. March 3rd, 1880. The dreams will not stop. Every night I see it, the heart of Ravenswood, pulsing with an otherworldly light. It calls to me, promising knowledge beyond imagining, power beyond reckoning. But I see now the danger. What I believed to be a gift may well be a curse. I must find a way to seal it away, to protect the world from what I have unleashed. But how? The very walls of Ravenswood resist me now, changing and shifting like a living thing. I am a prisoner in my own home, stalked by shadows of my own creation. The journal entries continued, growing more disjointed and paranoid with each passing month. Jeremiah Ravenswood wrote of secret rooms that appeared and disappeared at will, of whispers in the night that spoke of both temptation and warning, of a presence that grew stronger with each passing day. The final entry, dated just days before Jeremiah's mysterious disappearance, sent a chill down David's spine. December 21st, 1880. I have done what I can. The power is contained, for now, hidden behind puzzles and wards that even I may not be able to unlock again. But it is not enough. Ravenswood has a will of its own now, a hunger that will not be denied. I go now to make my final stand, to use what strength remains to me to bind the power more firmly. If I do not return, let this serve as both warning and guide to whoever may follow. The treasure of Ravenswood is real, but its price is higher than you can imagine. Only one whose heart is true, whose motives are pure, can hope to unlock its secrets without being consumed. To my heir, whoever you may be, I am sorry for the burden I place upon you. May you succeed where I have failed. The journal slipped from David's numb fingers, landing on the desk with a soft thud. His mind struggled to process what he had read. The ramblings of a madman, an elaborate hoax. Or could it be, impossible as it seemed, the truth? As if in answer to his unspoken question, a low rumble shook the library. Books tumbled from their shelves, and the chandelier swayed ominously overhead. David leapt to his feet, adrenaline surging through his veins. The rumbling intensified, and with a sound like tearing fabric, a crack appeared in the far wall. It widened rapidly, revealing a darkness that seemed to swallow the candlelight. David stood frozen, torn between terror and an inexplicable urge to step forward, to peer into that yawning blackness. The air grew heavy, charged with a palpable energy that made his skin tingle. And then, as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. The rumbling ceased, the crack sealed itself as if it had never been, and the library was once again silent and still. Heart pounding, David sank back into the chair. What had he gotten himself into? The rational part of his mind screamed at him to leave, to sell Ravenswood and never look back. But a deeper part, a part he was only just beginning to acknowledge, knew it was too late for that. He was part of this now, for better or worse. As the first rays of sunlight crept through the windows, David made a silent vow. He would unravel the mystery of Ravenswood, would find the treasure that Jeremiah had hidden away. Not for wealth or power, but because he sensed, on a level beyond conscious thought, that it was vital he do so. Whatever force had drawn him to this place, whatever destiny awaited him, he would face it head on. With trembling hands, he gathered the journal and the ornate box, securing them in a hidden safe he'd installed in his bedroom. Then, squaring his shoulders, he went to meet the arriving work crew. The restoration of Ravenswood would continue, but now with a new purpose, a cover for his true mission. As he stepped out onto the mansion's sprawling front porch, David took a deep breath of the crisp morning air. Ravenswood loomed behind him, its windows reflecting the rising sun like watchful eyes. For a moment, he could have sworn he saw a figure standing at one of the upper windows, a tall, bearded man in old-fashioned clothes, watching him with an unreadable expression. But when David blinked, the figure was gone. The sound of approaching vehicles broke the spell. David descended the steps to greet his team, his mind already racing with plans. He had research to do, codes to crack, and a mansion full of secrets to explore. The mystery of Ravenswood was only beginning to unfold, and David Carter was determined to see it through to the end, whatever the cost. The sound of approaching vehicles broke the spell. David descended the steps to greet his team, his mind already racing with plans. He had research to do, codes to crack, and a mansion full of secrets to explore. The mystery of Ravenswood was only beginning to unfold, and David Carter was determined to see it through to the end, whatever the cost. As the days turned into weeks, David fell into a new routine. By day, he oversaw the restoration work, guiding his team with a keen eye for detail and a growing appreciation for the mansion's original craftsmanship. But it was the nights that truly came alive for him now. Armed with Jeremiah's journal and the enigmatic map, David prowled the halls of Ravenswood, searching for clues and hidden mechanisms. His first breakthrough came on a stormy night, when the wind howled through the eaves and rain lashed against the windows. David had been examining the ornate fireplace in the master bedroom, his fingers tracing the intricate carvings of leaves and vines. As a particularly loud thunderclap shook the house, his hand slipped, pressing against a small, unremarkable leaf. There was a soft click, and a section of the fireplace swung inward, revealing a narrow passageway. Heart pounding, David retrieved a flashlight from his pocket and stepped into the hidden corridor. The air was thick with dust and the musty scent of long-forgotten secrets. Cobwebs brushed against his face as he made his way forward, the beam of his flashlight illuminating rough stone walls covered in strange, faded symbols. The passage seemed to go on forever, twisting and turning deep into the heart of the mansion. Just as David was beginning to wonder if he should turn back, the corridor opened up into a small, circular room. His flashlight beam played across the walls, revealing more of the mysterious symbols he'd seen in the passageway. But it was what stood in the center of the room that took his breath away. A pedestal of dark, polished wood rose from the floor, its surface inlaid with an intricate pattern of silver and mother-of-pearl. Atop the pedestal sat a crystal sphere, about the size of a grapefruit, that seemed to glow with an inner light. As David approached, the glow intensified, pulsing in time with his heartbeat. With trembling hands, he reached out to touch the sphere. The moment his fingers made contact, a jolt of energy surged through him. The room around him seemed to fade away, replaced by a whirlwind of images and sensations. He saw Ravenswood as it had been in its prime, halls filled with laughter and music. He saw Jeremiah Ravenswood, younger and full of life, poring over ancient tomes in the library. And he saw something else, something vast and incomprehensible that lurked beneath the very foundations of the mansion. The vision ended as abruptly as it had begun, leaving David gasping for breath, his hand still resting on the cool surface of the crystal sphere. He stumbled back, his mind reeling from what he'd seen. This was it, the heart of Ravenswood that Jeremiah had written about in his journal. But what did it mean? What was the power that the old tycoon had discovered? And why had he gone to such lengths to hide it away? As if in response to his unspoken questions, a low humming filled the air. The symbols on the walls began to glow, casting eerie shadows around the room. And then, to David's amazement, they began to move, rearranging themselves into new patterns. He watched, transfixed, as they formed words in an ancient script he somehow understood. Seeker of truth, heed this warning. The power of Ravenswood is not a prize to be won, but a responsibility to be borne. 3 trials await you: wisdom to perceive, courage to endure, compassion to transcend. Only by passing all 3 can you hope to unlock the mansion's deepest secrets. Fail, and you will share the fate of those who came before. The glowing words faded, leaving David alone in the dimly lit chamber. He sank to his knees, overwhelmed by the weight of what he'd discovered. This was so much bigger than a hidden treasure or a restoration project. He was being offered a chance to unravel a mystery that spanned centuries, perhaps even dimensions. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was he really the right person for this? He was an architect, not an adventurer or a mystic. What if he failed? What if he unleashed something he couldn't control? But as quickly as the doubts arose, they were replaced by a sense of purpose unlike anything he'd ever known. Ravenswood had called to him for a reason. Whatever trials lay ahead, he would face them. With newfound determination, David rose to his feet. He cast one last look at the crystal sphere, then made his way back through the hidden passage. As he emerged into the master bedroom, he was startled to realize that hours had passed. The storm had blown itself out, and the first light of dawn was creeping through the windows. David knew he should have been exhausted, but he felt energized, almost giddy with excitement and nerves. He had so much to do, so much to prepare for. But first, he needed to record everything he'd seen and experienced while it was still fresh in his mind. Hurrying to his makeshift office, David pulled out a leather-bound notebook he'd bought on a whim shortly after moving in. It had seemed fitting, somehow, to chronicle his restoration of Ravenswood in a journal similar to Jeremiah's. Now, he realized, it would serve a far greater purpose. As he put pen to paper, the words flowed freely. He described the hidden passage, the circular chamber, the crystal sphere, and the vision it had shown him. He sketched the strange symbols as best he could remember them, and transcribed the warning message. When he was done, he sat back, rereading what he'd written. Seen in the cold light of day, it all seemed fantastical, like something out of a fever dream or a Gothic novel. Yet David knew, with a certainty that went bone deep, that it had all been real. The lingering tingle in his fingertips where he'd touched the sphere, the faint smell of ozone that clung to his clothes. These were not things he could have imagined. A knock at the door startled him out of his reverie. "Mr. Carter!" It was Mike, his foreman. "The team's all here. We're ready to start on the East Wing whenever you are." David glanced at his watch, surprised to see it was already past 8. He'd been writing for hours without realizing it. "Thanks, Mike," he called back. "I'll be down in 10 minutes. As he heard Mike's footsteps retreating, David turned back to his journal. At the bottom of the last page, he wrote a final sentence. "The restoration continues, but now with a dual purpose. Whatever secrets Ravenswood holds, whatever trials await me, I will see this through. For Jeremiah, for myself, and for reasons I don't yet fully understand." Closing the journal, David took a deep breath. He had a role to play, the ambitious architect, focused solely on bringing Ravenswood back to its former glory. But beneath that facade, a new David was emerging. One who walked the line between two worlds, who sought a truth hidden in the very walls around him. As he made his way downstairs to meet his team, David's mind was already working, fitting together pieces of the puzzle. The three trials mentioned in the warning, wisdom, courage, and compassion. What form would they take? How would he recognize them when they came? And more importantly, was he truly ready to face them? The grand foyer of Ravenswood stretched out before him, a world of possibilities hidden within its faded grandeur. As he greeted his team and began outlining the day's tasks, David felt the mansion itself watching him, waiting to see what he would do next. The game was afoot, and David Carter was determined to see it through to whatever end awaited him. The grand foyer of Ravenswood stretched out before him, a world of possibilities hidden within its faded grandeur. As he greeted his team and began outlining the day's tasks, David felt the mansion itself watching him, waiting to see what he would do next. The game was afoot, and David Carter was determined to see it through to whatever end awaited him. As the weeks passed, David fell into a rhythm that bordered on the surreal. By day, he was the consummate professional, guiding the restoration with a keen eye and steady hand. He threw himself into the work, marveling at each uncovered detail of Ravenswood's original craftsmanship. The mansion was truly a masterpiece, and bringing it back to life filled him with a sense of purpose he'd never known in his corporate projects. But it was the nights that truly came alive for David now. Armed with Jeremiah's journal, the mysterious map, and his own growing collection of notes, he prowled the halls of Ravenswood like a man possessed. Every shadow held the promise of a new discovery. Every creak of old timber whispered of secrets longing to be unveiled. He returned to the hidden chamber often, drawn by the pulsing energy of the crystal sphere. Each time he touched it, new visions flooded his mind, tantalizing glimpses of Ravenswood's past and hints of the power that lay dormant within its walls. But the three trials mentioned in the glowing warning remained elusive, leaving David both frustrated and increasingly anxious. It was on a moonless night, nearly a month after his initial discovery, that everything changed. David had been in the library, poring over old town records he'd managed to unearth, searching for any clue to Ravenswood's history that might shed light on his quest. The hour was late, the house silent save for the occasional settling of old wood. As he leaned back, rubbing his tired eyes, a flicker of movement caught his attention. There, in the darkest corner of the room, a shadowy figure seemed to coalesce. David's heart raced, his body tensing for flight or fight. But as the figure solidified, he felt a strange calm wash over him. The apparition, for what else could it be, took the form of a young woman dressed in the fashion of a bygone era. Her features were indistinct, as if viewed through a veil of mist, but her eyes burned with an intensity that pinned David to his seat. "You seek the trials," the figure spoke, her voice echoing as if from a great distance. "But do you truly understand what you ask? The path you walk is treacherous, David Carter. It has broken greater men than you." David swallowed hard, finding his voice with effort. Who are you?" A sad smile played across the apparition's ghostly features. "I am but an echo, a memory of what once was. I have waited long for one who might succeed where others failed. But I warn you, the trials are not mere tests of skill or wit. They will strip you bare, force you to confront the very essence of who you are." "I'm ready," David said, surprising himself with the conviction in his voice. "Whatever it takes, I'll see this through." The figure regarded him silently for a long moment. Then, with a gesture both graceful and imperious, she pointed towards the fireplace. Your first trial awaits, seeker. Wisdom to perceive, not just with your eyes, but with your heart and soul. Find the path that is hidden in plain sight, and you will have taken your first step towards unlocking Ravenswood's true power. With those cryptic words, the apparition faded, leaving David alone in the suddenly oppressive silence of the library. He sat motionless for several heartbeats, his mind reeling. Had it been real? A hallucination born of too many late nights and an overactive imagination? But no. He could still feel the otherworldly chill that had accompanied the spectral visitor. Slowly, as if in a trance, David rose and approached the fireplace. It was a massive thing of carved stone, large enough for a man to stand in comfortably. He'd examined it dozens of times before, searching for hidden catches or secret compartments, but had found nothing. Now, with the ghost's words echoing in his mind, he forced himself to look deeper. Hidden in plain sight, he murmured, running his hands over the intricate carvings. Leaves and vines intertwined, forming complex patterns that seemed to shift in the flickering firelight. Hours passed as David studied every inch of the fireplace, his architect's mind working in overdrive to decipher the puzzle before him. As the first light of dawn began to creep through the windows, he stepped back, frustration etching lines across his forehead. He was missing something. He knew it. But what? What was he failing to perceive? Exhausted, David sank into a nearby armchair, his gaze still fixed on the fireplace. As his eyelids grew heavy, the carved patterns began to blur and shift. In that hazy state between waking and sleeping, a new perspective suddenly snapped into focus. The individual elements of the carving, each leaf, each twisting vine, were just parts of a greater whole. Viewed from a distance, with eyes half closed and mind open, they formed a picture. A face emerged from the stone, wise and ancient, its eyes seeming to stare directly into David's soul. With a gasp, David leapt to his feet, suddenly wide awake. He approached the fireplace once more, his heart pounding. Yes, there it was, a face hidden within the very structure of the carving, invisible unless you knew exactly how to look. Hardly daring to breathe, David reached out and pressed his hand against the figure's forehead. There was a moment of resistance, and then a soft click. The entire left side of the fireplace swung inward, revealing a narrow passageway bathed in a soft, pulsing light. David stood at the threshold, a heady mix of triumph and trepidation coursing through him. He had passed the first test, wisdom to perceive what was hidden in plain sight. But what challenges lay ahead? What secrets waited to be uncovered in the glowing passage before him? Taking a deep breath, David stepped forward into the unknown. The passage sealed behind him with a soft whisper of stone on stone, leaving no trace of its existence in the quiet library. Ravenswood had claimed him fully now, drawing him deeper into its web of mystery and magic. As he made his way down the gently sloping corridor, David's mind raced with possibilities. The ghost's warning echoed in his thoughts. This was no simple treasure hunt, but a journey that would force him to confront the very core of his being. Was he truly ready for what lay ahead? The pulsing light grew stronger as he descended, emanating from symbols etched into the walls, symbols similar to those he'd seen in the chamber with the crystal sphere. They seemed to watch him as he passed, judging his worthiness for the trials to come. Finally, the passage opened up into a vast cavern that took David's breath away. Stalactites hung from the ceiling like frozen waterfalls, and in the center of the space stood an altar of rough-hewn stone. Atop it sat a book, ancient and imposing, its cover adorned with the same symbols that lined the walls. As David approached, he felt a shift in the air, a gathering of unseen energies. This was it, the true beginning of his journey. Whatever lay within the pages of that book would set him on a path from which there was no turning back. With trembling hands, he reached for the tome, its leather binding cool beneath his fingertips. As he opened it, a voice that was both everywhere and nowhere spoke directly into his mind. "Welcome, Seeker, to the heart of Ravenswood's mystery. You have passed the first trial, but greater challenges await. Within these pages lies knowledge long forgotten by the world of men. But beware, for knowledge without wisdom is a dangerous thing. Are you prepared to learn truths that may shake the very foundations of your reality?" David hesitated for only a moment before answering aloud, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "I am ready. Show me what I need to know." As if in response, the pages of the book began to turn of their own accord, ancient script flowing across the parchment like living things. David felt knowledge pouring into him, secrets of the universe, glimpses of realities beyond human comprehension, the true history of Ravenswood and the power it contained. He lost all sense of time as he stood there, absorbing wisdom that threatened to overwhelm his mortal mind. When at last the flow of information ceased, David stumbled back, gasping for breath. He felt changed, expanded somehow, as if the boundaries of his very self had been stretched to encompass something vast and unknowable. As he struggled to process all that he had learned, a new passage opened up in the far wall of the cavern. The voice spoke once more, tinged now with what might have been approval. "You have weathered the storm of knowledge, David Carter. But knowing is not enough. One must also have the courage to act on that knowledge, and the compassion to wield it wisely. Go now, and prepare yourself for the trials that lie ahead. The fate of more than just Ravenswood hangs in the balance." On unsteady legs, David made his way towards the new opening. As he crossed the threshold, he cast one last look back at the cavern and the book that had changed everything. He was no longer just an architect restoring an old mansion. He was a man on the cusp of a journey that would reshape not only his own destiny, but potentially the fate of the world itself. With a deep breath, David stepped forward into the unknown, ready to face whatever challenges Ravenswood had in store for him next.